Mr. Dale, do you admit to the crime?
No, I do not.
Mr. Dale, the evidence points at you.
We have just received confirmation. The body of missing woman Dee Ann Warner has been found in a farm tank.
April 25, 2021. 3 Franklin Township, Michigan. A man is welding something in the darkness. Something he should never be welding. In a building with no security cameras. He's sealing a large agricultural tank. Completely shut. Then he paints it. Attaches it to a chassis. Even has the audacity to put his company logo on it. By sunrise, it'll look like just another piece of farm equipment. Normal. Unremarkable. But inside that tank is his wife. 12 hours earlier, 52-year-old Dee Ann Warner sent her last text message. Just one letter. For 3 years and 4 months, everyone searched for her. The FBI, Michigan State Police, helicopters, drones, ground-penetrating radar, cadaver dogs. They searched everywhere. Fields, woods, wells, ponds, neighboring properties. They never checked the tank. The tank that was sitting right there, on her own property, just 100 feet from where she was last seen alive. The tank her brother told them to check, years before they actually did. When they finally opened it, they found her. But this story doesn't start with a discovery in 2024. It starts with a decision in 2021. A decision one woman made that sealed her fate. A decision to leave a marriage that had become a prison. Welcome to Mysterious Crime Chronicles, where we uncover the truth behind cases that will leave you questioning everything. Before we dive deep into this shocking case, hit that subscribe button right now. We cover cases like this every week, and trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming. Ring that notification bell because this case has a trial coming up in January 2026, and we'll be covering every single update. Alright, let's get into it. What if I told you that the smallest detail, a single letter, never typed, never sent, would become the key to solving a murder? What if the answer to one of Michigan's most shocking crimes was hiding in plain sight, buried in hundreds of text messages that a missing woman would never send again? Stay with me, because this is the story of Dee Ann Warner, and by the time you understand what happened to her, you'll realize that sometimes the most important clues aren't what we find, they're what we don't find at all. On August 13, 2021, Dee Ann Warner simply vanished from her property in Michigan. For months, nobody knew what happened to her. For months, her family searched. The police investigated. And then, 6 months later, they made a discovery that would shock everyone. But before we get there, you need to know exactly who Dee was. Because her disappearance wasn't random. It wasn't a kidnapping by a stranger. It was something far more calculated. Something that had been building for years, right under everyone's noses. Dee Ann Warner was born on June 30, 1968. She was 52 years old when she disappeared, and by any measure, she had built herself an impressive life. She was a mother to 5 children, a grandmother, a woman who had worked her way up from nothing to become a successful businesswoman worth millions of dollars. This wasn't inherited money. This wasn't luck. This was someone who had earned everything she had. She owned a trucking company called DDW Investments LLC, the initials standing for her own name. The business was based on her property on Munger Road in Franklin Township, Lenawee County, Michigan, about 30 miles south of Detroit. From that location, she ran a thriving operation, managing trucks, coordinating shipments, building relationships with clients. She was the kind of woman who made things happen. The kind of woman people called when they needed something done. Those who knew her describe her as vibrant, outgoing, energetic. She loved her family fiercely. She was involved in her grandchildren's lives. She was the kind of grandmother who showed up. The kind of mother who stayed connected. She had a presence about her, the kind that filled a room. People noticed Dee Ann Warner when she walked in. But here's what you need to understand about Dee, and this detail will matter more than you can possibly imagine right now. She was a communicator, a constant communicator. Dee didn't just talk to people. She maintained an endless, detailed dialogue with the world around her. She texted. She texted constantly. Hundreds of messages every single day. Not brief, dismissive texts. Not the kind where someone types "okay" or "K" and moves on. Dee sent long messages. Detailed messages. Messages with multiple thoughts strung together. Messages with exclamation points. Messages with emojis. Messages where she took the time to express complete ideas, full sentences, real engagement with the people she was communicating with. In March of 2022, about 6 months after Dee disappeared, the family hired a private investigator named Billy Little Jr. Billy wasn't just any investigator. He was the kind of professional who notices things others miss. He decided to do something most people wouldn't think to do. He analyzed every single text message Dee had ever sent. Hundreds of messages. Thousands of individual texts spanning years. He went through them methodically, looking for patterns, for habits, for the fingerprint of her communication style. And here's what he found. Here's what makes your skin crawl when you understand it. In all the years he examined, in all the hundreds and hundreds of text messages Dee Ann Warner had sent, Billy Little Jr. made a discovery that defied every expectation. He looked at message after message, conversation after conversation, and he found something absolutely absent. Something that should have appeared dozens, maybe hundreds of times, but never did. Not once. Not a single time. Never once, not one single time, was her response the letter K. Let that sink in. In a world where people casually text K to acknowledge messages, to show they understood something, to keep conversations moving forward, Dee Ann Warner never, ever did that. Not according to Billy's analysis. Not a single instance. Whether it was intentional or whether it was just her style, something about her personality that made her type out "okay" or "sounds good" instead of taking the shortcut, it became the baseline of how she communicated. And this detail, this seemingly insignificant thing about the way she texted, would become one of the most crucial pieces of evidence in understanding what happened to her. Because on August 13, 2021, something happened on Dee's farm that would lead to the discovery of her remains months later. Something that involved the people closest to her. Something that began with a mystery and ended with a truth so dark that even now, years later, people in Michigan still talk about the case. Dee Ann Warner had built a life of success, of family, of presence. But behind that life, in the spaces between the good times and the family gatherings, there were currents running beneath the surface. Family tensions that had been building, financial complications, and at least one person who believed they had motivation to want her gone. In 2006, Dee Ann Warner made a decision that would ultimately lead to her death. She married Dale John Warner. On the surface, it looked like a partnership between two people who understood business, who could build something together. They combined their assets. They merged their operations. The farming business and the trucking company would run from their shared property on Munger Road. To anyone looking from the outside, they appeared successful. A couple with resources, with land, with ambition. On May 10, 2024, at a preliminary hearing in Michigan, Dee's daughter Rickel Bach took the stand. Rickel had moved back home to help her mother during a difficult time. She lived in that house. She saw what was happening, and when she was asked about her stepfather, Dale John Warner, she described a man engaged in a methodical, calculated campaign of control. According to Rickel's testimony, Dale wasn't just a jealous husband. He was building something. She called it a cage. Not a cage of walls and locks, but a cage made of surveillance. A cage designed to monitor every movement, every communication, every moment of Dee's life. It started with technology. Dale enlisted help from someone who had access to the right equipment. His former son-in-law, an employee named Brian Bush. Together, they installed a GPS tracker on Dee's Hummer without her knowledge. The tracker was hidden. She didn't know it was there. But Dale did. And every time she drove somewhere, every destination she visited, every route she took, he could see it in real time. Over a 16-month period, Dale Warner accessed that OnStar system more than 2,000 times. 2,000 separate instances of him logging in to track his wife's location. That breaks down to approximately 125 times per month. 4.2 times per day. 4 times every single day. Morning, afternoon, evening, night. He was checking. Always checking. Always knowing. But the GPS tracking and the OnStar access weren't the full extent of it. Dale had moved beyond passive monitoring. He wanted direct access to her communications, her conversations, her private thoughts. He installed a hidden camera in their kitchen. Not just one camera pointed at the door or the driveway. A camera positioned to capture intimate moments, private conversations, anything that happened in the space where Dee spent much of her time. She was being watched while she ate, while she made phone calls, while she had conversations with family members who visited. He cloned her phone. This wasn't some simple way of checking her location. This was accessing her entire digital life. Every text message she sent or received, every phone call, every contact, every photo. He could read her communications in real time, seeing conversations as they happened, watching her digital footprint the way someone might watch a person through glass. And then there was the safe. Dee kept important documents in a safe. Financial records, personal papers, things she considered private. Dale replaced it. He switched out her safe with an identical lookalike, one that he could access whenever he wanted. He could read her private documents. He could see her financial information. He could know every secret she kept. This wasn't the behavior of a loving husband. This wasn't jealousy in the traditional sense. This was comprehensive control. This was someone who had become obsessed with knowing everything, controlling everything, eliminating any possibility that his wife had thoughts, communications, or movements that existed outside his awareness. But surveillance, no matter how extensive, has limitations. It can show you where someone goes and what they say, but it can't control how they feel. It can't force compliance through technology alone. And Dale Warner apparently understood that he needed another tool in his arsenal. December 2020, 4 months before Dee would disappear. The relationship between Dee and Dale had deteriorated to the point of open conflict. During one of these arguments, something physical happened. Dale threw Dee into a dresser. The impact was hard enough that it left marks. It left damage. It was violence, not an accident, not a moment of lost control that could be explained away. Violence. Rickelbach, Dee's daughter, was in that house. She witnessed what her stepfather was capable of. When she testified about life in that farmhouse, she described an environment of constant tension, constant noise, constant emotional chaos. She said, and these are her exact words from the courtroom, a lot of yelling, cussing, slamming things. This wasn't a quiet house. This wasn't a place where two people were having a disagreement that might be worked through with counseling or communication. This was a house filled with rage, filled with control, filled with the kind of tension that makes everyone in it live in a state of constant alertness, never knowing what might happen next. But there's something else that emerged from the testimony. Something that shows Dee understood, on some level, what she was living in, what she was dealing with, how dangerous the situation had become. Dee had a habit. She watched true crime television. She would sit down at night, and she would watch Dateline. She'd watch shows about murders, about relationships gone wrong, about people who disappeared. She consumed these stories, these real-life accounts of women who had been harmed by the people closest to them. And at some point, Dee said something to a friend. Something that revealed what she was thinking about, what she was afraid of. She said, "I watch Dateline like every night and Dale could do something like that to me." She knew. Dee Ann Warner was watching stories about women who were murdered by their husbands, and she was looking at her own life and seeing the parallels. She was seeing the control. She was seeing the surveillance. She was seeing the violence. And she was afraid. Not in an abstract way. Not in a way that she could dismiss or rationalize. She was genuinely afraid that her husband could kill her. The question that haunts this case is this: did she tell anyone else? Did she try to leave? Did she make any attempt to escape the situation she found herself in? And if she did, why wasn't she able to? These are the questions that the investigation would eventually answer, but they're also the questions that reveal something crucial about how trapped Dee had become. She lived on a property that she owned, but it was a property where her every movement was tracked, where her communications were monitored, where hidden cameras watched her, where the man she was married to had complete access to every aspect of her private life. She was surrounded by people who loved her children, her grandchildren, but the man she slept next to was the greatest threat. By the beginning of 2021, the year Dee would disappear, the situation had reached a critical point. The surveillance had become more intense. The arguments had become more volatile. The violence had become more frequent. And somewhere in that escalation, something shifted. Something changed. The control that Dale had been exerting wasn't enough anymore. Or the situation had become so unstable that something had to give. Dee Ann Warner was heading toward a date in August. A date that would define what happened next. A date when the cage would become inescapable. A date when control would transform into something final. April 2021. After years of surveillance, control, and fear, Dee Ann Warner made a decision. She was leaving. That Saturday morning, April 24th, Dee called her daughter Rickle. She told her, "I'm done. I'm leaving Dale. I'm going to talk to him tonight." The arguments that had defined their marriage were reaching a breaking point. Around evening time, Dee made a decision she thought was smart. She asked her friend Amy Alexander to pick up their 9-year-old daughter, Angelina. Dee wanted to talk to Dale alone, without their daughter hearing the argument about divorce. She thought sending Angelina away would make things calmer. She was wrong. 7:42 that evening, Amy Alexander arrived at the Warner property. She picked up Angelina. The little girl left her mother's house, not knowing what the next few hours would bring. The house was empty now. Just Dale and Dee. Alone on hundreds of acres of farmland. Alone to have the conversation that would end everything. 8:34 that evening. Dale cleared the property of the last remaining worker. Everyone was gone. No witnesses. No one to hear what was about to happen. 10:25 that night. Amy Alexander sent Dee a text message. A simple check-in. The kind of message a concerned friend sends. "How are you doing?" No response. The minutes ticked by. 10 minutes. 20 minutes. 25 minutes. Then at 10:52, a response came from Dee's phone. One letter. Amy stared at her phone. Something felt wrong. Dee never texted like that. Never. In years of friendship, in hundreds of text messages, Dee had never sent a single letter response. She wrote complete thoughts. She used exclamation points. She engaged. But now, just okay. And at that exact moment, something else happened. Dee's phone switched from Wi-Fi to cellular service. It disconnected from the home network. It was moving. Or someone was moving it. The lights in the Warner house stayed on through the night. From 10:30 Saturday night into the early hours of Sunday morning, the lights blazed. Neighbors who might have glanced that direction would have seen nothing unusual. But inside that house, something was happening. Something that would end with Dee Ann Warner never being seen alive again. 10:24. Amy Alexander, the friend who had picked up Angelina just hours earlier, sends Dee a text message. A simple check-in. "How are you doing?" The phone sits somewhere in that house. Somewhere on that property. The screen lights up with Amy's question. No response. The clock on the wall keeps moving. 10:25. 10:30. 10:35. 10:40. The minutes stretch out like hours. Amy stares at her phone. Waiting. Watching for those 3 little dots that show someone is typing. Watching for any sign that her friend is okay. 29 minutes pass. Still nothing. And then at 10:53, the phone vibrates in Amy's hand. A response. One letter. Just the letter K. Amy stares at the screen. Something feels wrong. Deeply, fundamentally wrong. This isn't how Dee texts. This isn't how Dee communicates. Dee is expressive. She uses complete sentences. She adds exclamation points. She writes out her thoughts. She engages. In all the years of their friendship, in all the hundreds of text messages they've exchanged, Dee has never responded with just the letter K. Not once. Private investigator Billy Little would later analyze every text message Dee had ever sent. Hundreds of them. Maybe thousands. He found conversations spanning years. Messages about business. Messages about family. Messages about her daughter. Messages about everyday life. And in all of those messages, not one single time did Dee Ann Warner respond with just the letter K. But tonight, after 29 minutes of silence following a question about whether she's okay having a conversation about divorce with her controlling, violent husband, and at that exact moment, something else happens. Something technical. Something that would only be discovered later when investigators dug through phone records and cellular data. Dee's phone switches from Wi-Fi to cellular service. It disconnects from the home network. Think about what that means. The phone was in the house, connected to the Warner home's Wi-Fi network. And then, right at 10:53, right when that single-letter response is sent, it disconnects. It switches to cellular. The phone is moving, or someone is moving it. The hours crawl forward into the early morning of Sunday, April 25th. 1 o'clock, 1:30, 2 o'clock. And then at 2:30 in the morning, Dee Ann Warner's phone goes dead. Not turned off. Not powered down manually. The battery drains. The screen goes black. The device stops pinging cell towers. It would never turn on again. Dee wore an Apple Watch. The kind that tracks your steps, monitors your heart rate, connects to your phone. The kind of device that becomes an extension of you when you wear it every day. At 2:30 in the morning, that watch goes offline too. Both devices. Simultaneously. Gone. Her digital footprint ends at 2:30 a.m. on April 25, 2021. No more text messages. No more phone calls. No more location data. No more connection to the network. Dee Ann Warner ceases to exist in the digital world at exactly 2:30 in the morning. But here's what makes this timeline so chilling. Here's what investigators would piece together later when they examined everything that happened that night. The lights in the Warner house never went off. From 10:30 Saturday night until well into Sunday morning, the lights stayed on. All of them. The kind of detail a neighbor might notice if they happen to glance that direction. The kind of detail that seems normal until you understand what it means. Someone was awake. Someone was doing something. Something that required light. Something that took hours. And Dale? According to digital evidence presented during his preliminary hearing, Dale's phone was active that night. Very active. Between the text message at 10:53 and the early morning hours, his phone was used. Not sleeping. Not in bed like he would later claim. Active. The question that would haunt investigators for years was simple. What was happening in those hours between 10:53, when someone sent that single letter K from Dee's phone, and 2:30 in the morning, when both her phone and her watch went dead? What was happening in a house with all the lights on? What was happening to a woman who had just told her husband she wanted a divorce? What was happening to a mother who had sent her daughter away so she wouldn't witness the argument? The answer would only come 3 years and 4 months later, when they finally opened a tank that had been sitting on the property the entire time. When they finally discovered what Dale Warner had spent those dark hours doing. But on that Sunday morning, as the sun rose over Lenawee County, Michigan, as the clock ticked past 6 a.m., as Dale would later claim he left the house and saw his wife sleeping peacefully on the couch, snoring away without a care in the world. Dee Ann Warner's phone was already dead. Her watch was already offline. Her bank accounts would show no activity. Not a single transaction. Not a withdrawal. Not a purchase. Nothing. Her social media would never be accessed again. And at 9 o'clock that Sunday morning, when her daughter Rickle walked into the house expecting their weekly Sunday breakfast together, expecting to go grocery shopping like they always did, expecting the normalcy of a mother who was always there, always present, always communicating, she would find an empty house. An empty office. Both of Dee's vehicles still parked on the property. And her mother gone. The woman who texted hundreds of messages every day had sent her last message the night before. One letter that wasn't hers. One letter that came 29 minutes too late. One letter that marked the exact moment when Dee Ann Warner's digital life ended and something else began. Something that would take 3 years and 4 months to uncover. Something that was happening right there on the property all along. In a tank marked "Do Not Use." welded shut in the darkness while the lights of the farmhouse blazed through the night. Of course, Dale had an explanation. When Deputy Austin Hall from the Lenawee County Sheriff's Office arrived that Sunday afternoon, Dale Warner told a story. They'd had a fight that night, he said. The worst argument of their life. About money. About infidelity. But then, Dale claimed, Dee had a migraine headache. She was lying on the floor. He gave her a massage. She fell asleep around 12:30. He picked her up, moved her to the couch. At 6 o'clock Sunday morning, before leaving to work in the fields, he checked on her one last time. She was sleeping. Snoring even. Still on that couch. When he came back, she was gone. He found her wedding ring sitting on his desk in the office. That was his story. But his story had problems. Serious problems that would emerge within hours of him telling it. Problem 1, Dale's appearance. When family members saw him that morning, he looked exhausted. He admitted to multiple people that he hadn't slept all night. His face showed it. Dark circles. The kind of fatigue that doesn't come from sleeping peacefully while your wife snores on the couch. Problem 2, when Rickle arrived Sunday morning at 9:30 for their weekly breakfast tradition, she noticed something strange. Fresh tire tracks near the back sliding glass door. Tracks from heavy equipment. The kind that would leave deep impressions in the ground. Why would heavy machinery be driven right up to the house in the middle of the night? Problem 3, security cameras. Dee's son Zach reviewed the office footage looking for any sign of his mother. The motion-activated system showed people coming and going on April 24th. But it never showed Dee entering the office to leave that wedding ring. It never showed her leaving the property at all. Problem 4, transportation. Both of Dee's vehicles sat in the driveway. Her Cadillac Escalade. Her Hummer. If she'd voluntarily left to start a new life somewhere else, how exactly did she leave? Problem 5, the child. Angelina, their 9-year-old daughter, was still at the friend's house. Dee hadn't picked her up, hadn't called to check on her, hadn't sent any message about when she'd return. What mother planning to run away leaves her youngest child behind without a word? Problem 6, complete silence. Dee's phone went dead at 2:30 that morning. Her bank accounts showed zero activity. No withdrawals. No purchases. No transfers. For a woman supposedly starting over somewhere new, there was no financial trail whatsoever. But the most suspicious thing wasn't what Dale said. It was what he did next. In the days and weeks after Dee vanished, Dale Warner made choices. Calculated choices that would later raise questions about what he knew and when he knew it. First, the Escalade. The vehicle that had been tracked over 2,000 times through OnStar. The vehicle that contained evidence of Dale's obsessive monitoring. He let it get repossessed. He didn't fight it. Didn't try to keep it. He let the bank take the evidence away. Then came the business maneuvers. Dee owned 100% of DDW Investments LLC, their profitable trucking company. The company was worth millions. Dale allegedly used a forged power of attorney from 2014 to transfer control of everything. He created a new entity, DDW Transportation LLC, his company now. He moved the good assets over, left the struggling farming operations and their debts behind. In 2022, he sold the entire trucking business to Laidlaw Carriers Bulk. All the money went to Dale, not to Dee's estate, not to her 5 children. Dale. When police pressed him about what happened to his wife, Dale always had theories. Alternative explanations. Different possibilities. Theory 1. She ran off with another man. She'd done it before, he claimed. After arguments, she would disappear for a while. She'd come back eventually. Theory 2. She had a secret second phone. One nobody knew about. She must have used it to call for a ride that night. Theory 3. She probably went to Mexico or Jamaica. Places she talked about visiting. Warm beaches. New life. Fresh start. But every theory had a problem. Her passport was never used. No border crossings showed up in any database. No international financial activity appeared on any account. And Dee's son Zach testified that his mother didn't have a second phone. Dale had an answer for everything. Every question. Every inconsistency. Every piece of evidence that didn't fit his narrative. Except one question. Where is Dee? October 11th and 12th, 2021. 6 months after Dee disappeared, law enforcement launched one of the biggest searches Lenawee County had ever seen. The FBI arrived. Michigan State Police deployed teams. The Lenawee County Sheriff's Office coordinated with Michigan Department of Natural Resources officers. Multiple K-9 cadaver dog units came from different agencies. They brought ground-penetrating radar, helicopters equipped with thermal imaging cameras, drones with high-resolution cameras, specialized equipment designed to check wells and septic systems, technology that could detect human remains underground, underwater, anywhere they might be hidden. The search covered the main Warner property on Munger Road. Every barn, every outbuilding, every storage structure. They searched the Paragon Road property about 2 miles away. Surrounding fields, dense woods, multiple ponds, neighboring properties where Dee might have wandered or been taken. For 2 solid days, dozens of officers and investigators combed through hundreds of acres. Dogs sniffing, radar scanning, helicopters circling overhead. What they found, 1 set of keys. That's it. Nothing else. No body, no clothing, no evidence of where Dee might have gone or what might have happened to her. They walked right past the anhydrous ammonia tanks, the large agricultural tanks used for storing fertilizer, tanks that sat in plain sight on the property. Multiple times, search teams passed them, looked at them, moved on. And here's the part that would haunt the family for years. Dee's brother, Greg Hardy, told investigators to check those tanks. He specifically mentioned them. They didn't. After 2 days of intensive searching, the teams packed up their equipment, loaded their vehicles, left the property. The case went cold. No leads, no breakthroughs, no answers for a family that desperately needed them. March 2022. 11 months after Dee disappeared, the family made a decision. If law enforcement couldn't find answers, they would hire someone who could. Billy Little Jr., attorney and private investigator from Arizona. He specialized in complex missing persons cases, the kind where evidence is scarce and time has passed, the kind that require looking at details others miss. Billy approached the case methodically. He analyzed everything, every text message Dee had ever sent. He found the pattern. She was talkative, expressive. She texted constantly with full thoughts and complete sentences. Never once did she respond with anything like that single letter sent at 10:53 the night she disappeared. He conducted a forensic audit of the businesses. He found systematic asset transfers, found evidence of forged documents, found the power of attorney Dale had used to take control of Dee's company. He partnered with retired homicide detective Chris McDonough. Together, they covered the case on the Interview Room YouTube show. The case went national. Thousands of people heard Dee's story. The pressure on investigators increased. The scrutiny intensified. The family offered $50,000 for information leading to Dee's remains. Tips started coming in. People who had seen things, heard things, noticed details that might matter. August 2022. The criticism of the local investigation had become overwhelming. Sheriff Troy Bevier requested the case be transferred to Michigan State Police. Captain Steve O'Neill took over command. Detective Daniel Drewer became the lead investigator. Fresh eyes examined the evidence. More resources got deployed. A different approach replaced the old one. September 2022. Rickelbach filed a petition in Lenawee County Probate Court to have her mother declared legally dead. It was a painful decision, one no daughter should have to make. But without a death certificate, Dee's assets remained frozen. Her affairs stayed in limbo. March 2024. After lengthy court proceedings that cost the family well into 6 figures, a judge declared Dee Ann Warner legally dead. Dale knew where her body was the entire time. November 21st, 2023. Michigan State Police made their move. Dale John Warner, age 56, was arrested and charged with open murder and tampering with evidence. Open murder means the jury decides whether the crime constitutes first-degree premeditated murder or second-degree murder. The distinction matters. First degree carries mandatory life without parole. His bond was set at $15 million. He pleaded not guilty. The legal teams assembled. Defense: Mary Chartier of Okemos, Michigan. One of the most respected criminal defense attorneys in the state. Known for her aggressive defense of clients and her ability to challenge forensic evidence. Prosecution: Lenawee County Prosecuting Attorney Jacqueline Wise and Assistant Prosecutor David McCready. They faced a monumental challenge. They had surveillance evidence showing Dale's obsessive tracking of Dee. They had financial evidence showing motive. They had testimony about abuse and violence. They had expert analysis of the text messages. They had the timeline showing Dale had opportunity. But they didn't have the one thing that makes murder convictions almost certain: a body. Without physical remains, murder cases become battles of circumstantial evidence. Juries want to see proof. They want definitive answers. They want to know for certain that a person is dead and that the defendant killed them. Prosecutors moved forward anyway. They believed they had enough. The evidence was circumstantial, yes, but it was overwhelming. It pointed in only one direction. And then something happened that changed everything. August 17, 2024. August 17, 2024. 3 years, 3 months, and 23 days after Dee disappeared. Michigan State Police executed a search warrant on Dale Warner's property on Paragon Road, about 2 miles from the main residence. They'd searched this property before, multiple times during previous investigations. But this time, they focused on specific objects. The anhydrous ammonia tanks. Large agricultural tanks, similar to residential propane storage units, used for storing fertilizer. One tank looked different from the others. It had been resealed. The welds appeared fresh. Paint covered the surface, newer than the other tanks. And it had been moved to a different location than where it had been during previous searches. The tank had a tag attached to it. 3 words: "Do not use." They loaded the tank onto a truck, transported it to Detroit, to the United States-Canada border facility where they had specialized X-ray equipment capable of scanning large industrial containers. They positioned the tank under the machine, started the scan. The X-ray revealed a human body inside, sealed in darkness for over 3 years. They brought cutting equipment, industrial tools capable of opening the welded seams. They worked carefully, methodically, treating what was inside with the dignity it deserved. Inside that sealed tank, they found Dee Ann Warner. She'd been there the whole time, on property Dale controlled, hidden in plain sight, exactly where her brother Greg Hardy had told them to look years earlier. August 20th, 2024. The autopsy confirmed her identity through dental records. Cause of death: strangulation. Manner of death: homicide. In May 2025, during civil lawsuit proceedings, more details emerged about how the concealment happened. Dee's nephew Parker Hardy described it. In the dark of night, in a building with no security cameras, slide her body inside the tank. Put the end cap back on. Weld it completely shut. Then attach the tank to a chassis to make it transportable. Paint it to look fresh and maintained. Put the company logo on it to make it appear like normal farm equipment. Then move it to storage with other tanks so it blends in with the fleet, hidden among dozens of similar tanks. Sitting outdoors in the Michigan weather. Sealed so thoroughly that cadaver dogs couldn't detect what was inside. Positioned in a location where searchers would walk past it without a second thought. For 3 years and 4 months, Dee Ann Warner was less than 100 feet from where she was last seen alive. March 2025. The case took another turn that shocked everyone following it. Jaron Warner, Dale's 28-year-old son, was arrested and charged with evidence tampering and accessory after the fact to murder. His bond was set at $125,000. Jaron was the temporary legal guardian of Angelina, the young daughter Dee shared with Dale. He had moved into Dee's house after becoming his half-sister's guardian. The family reacted with shock but not complete surprise. Parker Hardy, Dee's nephew, stated, "Our family always had suspicions of an accomplice. We promise to bring justice for Dee, and we are going to make sure that everyone involved is held accountable for taking her life." But on May 13, 2025, prosecutors dropped the charges. They couldn't locate a key witness. Without that testimony, they didn't have enough to proceed. The charges can be refiled if the witness surfaces. Attorney Todd Flood, representing Dee's family, made it clear he's not in the free and clear. Questions remain. What did Jaron know about his father's actions? Did he help conceal the crime? Why can't investigators find the witness they need? May 21, 2025. Dee's estate, represented by daughter Rickelbach, filed a wrongful death civil lawsuit against Dale Warner. They're seeking a minimum of $100 million in damages. Attorney Todd Flood held a press conference revealing that Dale has assets exceeding 7 figures. There's money that's still being used and spent by Dale that should be given to the offspring, given to the family, Flood stated. That money should not go to a killer. That money should not go to his family. That money should go to the offspring. The lawsuit seeks more than just compensation. It seeks repayment for the legal battle to have Dee declared dead. That March 2024 trial cost the family well into 6 figures. Money they had to spend because Dale refused to tell them where he'd hidden their mother. The criminal trial was originally scheduled for September 2, 2025. But it was postponed. Defense attorney Mary Chartier needed surgery. The court granted a continuance. The new trial date, January 27, 2026. It's expected to last until March 27, 2026. 2 full months of testimony, evidence, and arguments. May 30, 2025. A major hearing took place in Lenawee County Circuit Court. Judge Michael Alsaver presiding. The defense filed 5 separate motions challenging different aspects of the prosecution's case. The most explosive motion requested a change of venue. Mary Chartier argued that Dale Warner cannot get a fair trial in Lenawee County because of social media bias. She presented evidence from the Justice for Dee Facebook page. What she showed the court was shocking. Someone had posted instructions on how to become what they called a stealth juror. The post explained how to scrub your social media profiles, how to hide your bias, how to lie during jury selection in order to get seated on the jury and guarantee a conviction. Judge Alsaver denied the motion to change venue but left the door open to reconsider later if necessary. He ordered that a special questionnaire be used during jury selection to identify and eliminate biased potential jurors. Catherine Adams, a close friend of Dee's and a leader of the Justice for Dee movement, responded publicly, "I do not condone that comment that was referenced to lying during jury selection on social media." The other defense motions met with mixed results. Motion to suppress evidence, denied. Motion to suppress jail phone calls, denied, but the defense received access to all call records for their review. Motion to compel discovery, approved. A hearing was scheduled to investigate whether text message evidence might be missing from the prosecution's files. When the trial begins in January 2026, everything will be at stake. For Dale Warner. For Dee's family. For justice itself. The charges are clear. Dale Warner faces open murder. The jury will decide, first-degree premeditated murder or second-degree murder. The distinction determines whether he spends the rest of his life in prison or has even the slimmest possibility of eventual parole. If convicted of first-degree murder, Dale Warner will receive mandatory life in prison without the possibility of parole. He will die behind bars. No appeals will change that sentence. The prosecution's case rests on multiple pillars of evidence. The body, found sealed in a tank Dale controlled. The cause of death, strangulation. The text message sent at 10:53, completely out of character for Dee. The OnStar tracking showing over 2,000 access requests. The surveillance equipment, hidden cameras, cloned phone, GPS trackers. The December 2020 assault establishing a pattern of violence. The security footage showing Dee entering the property but never leaving. The financial motive of a multi-million-dollar business. The tire tracks from heavy equipment near the back door that morning. The concealment, a tank welded shut, repainted, and hidden among others. Dale's suspicious behavior, repossessing the tracked vehicle, transferring assets, offering constantly changing theories. The timeline proving Dale was alone with Dee and had opportunity. Witness testimony from Rickel about the abuse, from Zach about the finances, from others about Dale's behavior. The prosecution must prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Dale Warner murdered his wife and concealed her body. Not just that he could have. Not just that he probably did. Beyond a reasonable doubt. Mary Chartier's job is to create that doubt. Challenge the timeline. Question the forensics. Argue that circumstantial evidence isn't enough. Point out gaps in what investigators can prove versus what they assume. But there's one fact she cannot explain away. One piece of evidence that ties everything together. Dee Ann Warner was found in a tank that Dale had access to. A tank that had been welded shut, repainted, and hidden. A tank on his property. The tank Greg Hardy told them to check years before they finally did. Behind all the legal proceedings, the motions, the evidence discussions, and the upcoming trial, there are real people. Real lives forever changed by what happened in those dark hours of April 25, 2021. Rickelbach arrived for Sunday breakfast on April 25th, expecting their weekly tradition. She found an empty house. For 3 years, she searched. She hired investigators. She fought in probate court to have her mother declared dead. She testified at hearings about the abuse she witnessed. Zach Bach used his knowledge of security systems and technology to help investigators. He reviewed camera footage. He provided financial records. He testified about his mother's business and the tracking evidence. He watched his mother's assets get transferred to the man accused of killing her. Angelina Warner was 9 years old when her mother sent her to a friend's house for what Dee thought would be a difficult but necessary conversation. She never saw her mother again. She's 13 now. A teenager growing up without the mother who loved her fiercely. Greg Hardy, Dee's brother, told investigators to check the tanks. Years before they actually did. He had to live with knowing he was right. Knowing his sister might have been found sooner if someone had listened. He organized searches. He hired investigators. He spoke to media. He never stopped fighting for his sister. Dee's grandchildren grew up without their grandmother. Children who should have had her at birthday parties, school events, holiday gatherings. Kids who will only know her through stories and photographs. Parker Hardy described his aunt as feisty, fierce, someone who would have walked out the door with her middle finger in the air, ring in her hand, and would have thrown a match back in the house if she'd actually chosen to leave. That's how the family remembers her. Independent. Someone who fought for what she wanted and didn't back down. Friends described Dee as confident, generous, fearless. Her son called her a caring mother who would move mountains to make sure us kids had anything we needed or wanted. Her brother called her a social butterfly who tried to be friends with everybody. This is what domestic violence looks like when it reaches its deadliest conclusion. A successful businesswoman. A devoted mother and grandmother. A woman who built a multi-million-dollar trucking company from nothing. Reduced to remains hidden in a tank for over 3 years. The trial in January 2026 will determine Dale Warner's legal fate. But no verdict can bring Dee back. No sentence can give her family the years they lost. No amount of justice can undo what happened in that house on April 24, 2021. What it can do is provide answers. Provide accountability. Provide a measure of closure for a family that has fought relentlessly for 3 years and 8 months to find out what happened to the woman they loved. And perhaps, in some small way, it can serve as a warning. A reminder that the signs of abuse matter. That control is violence. That surveillance is not love. That women who say they're afraid deserve to be believed. Dee Ann Warner watched Dateline every night. She told her friend, "Dale could do something like that to me." She knew. And on April 25, 2021, her worst fear came true. The trial begins January 27, 2026. The world will be watching.